huge amount of our pain is projected, just like fear. How many times in your life were you really afraid because you thought you were going to have no money, or your husband or your wife was going to leave you?
Greetings and welcome to the Dr. Espen podcast. I am your host, Espen, and today I'm joined by Paul Chek. Paul Chek is an expert in stress management, holistic wellness, and integrative lifestyle. And for over 40 years now, he's shared his approach to coaching and education and changed the lives of clients around the world. Can you tell us what is the pain teacher and how can we use it for our awakening and our healing and so on?
Essentially, the pain teacher is a signifier for the fact that what we are creating unconsciously manifests in our lives and can only produce the outcome of what we're choosing unconsciously.
Greetings and welcome to the Dr. Espen podcast. I am your host, Espen, and today I'm joined by Paul Chek. This is going to be a great conversation about anything in between the lines, not just reading what's in the physical realm, but actually tapping into energy. We're going to talk about kinesiology. We're going to talk about who and what we are, and also these powerful systems that we have inside of us. I want to talk a little bit about Paul Chek. He's a world-renowned expert in the field of corrective and high-performance exercise kinesiology. This is a conversation that we're going to dive into today because I know for many of you, you've probably started to learn a bit about kinesiology. Maybe you've had an experience, but I believe it's a very powerful methodology to access the wisdom that's in the unconscious mind. Paul Chek is an expert in stress management, holistic wellness, and integrative lifestyle. And for over 40 years now, he's shared his approach to coaching and education and changed the lives of clients around the world. Paul believes that integrating and healing the body as a whole system within systems and finding the root cause of the problem is the way to go. And he's actually achieved this by looking at not only traditional approaches that have often failed, but how to use these integrative approaches. He's the author of numerous books, videos, and professional development courses, and the creator of something really cool called Spirit Gym. So I want to have that conversation today. Paul Chek, welcome to the show. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. Thank you. It's lovely. And it's nice to talk to someone that's awake.
Great. We started off this conversation before we pressed record and right away we were talking about the whole process of being awake. Let's start there, brother. What does it mean to be awake?
Well, I think to be awake has many meanings, but I think the most important thing about being awake is to know that your choices actually cause a change in reality. And that, your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, and your behaviors have an impact on your internal and external environment and your relationships. And so when somebody's awake, they don't live ready, fire, aim. They slow down a little bit and think, what is it that I really want to create here before they speak or act.
Makes sense. Do you think this is an awakening happening on a collective level now? We see a lot of people starting to remember, it looks like. What are your thoughts?
I think we're going through an initiation worldwide. I think that, this gets a bit deep, but when you look at the history of religion, particularly the Abrahamic religions, there is a very, very strong impulse to keep us in a space of subservience to higher authority. And if you look at our educational institutions, they teach us what to think, not how to think. If you look at corporations like Google and Facebook and many, many others, there's tons and tons of science showing they're using the technologies that they have to control people's thoughts, feelings, emotions, purchases, and every other thing in their life. So if you look at how organized religion is structured, and you look at how our education systems are structured, and you look at how our financial systems are structured, we basically have at least a couple of thousand years where everybody is always having to follow somebody else's rules and be subservient. And we have watched our human sovereignty diminish progressively to the point where now anyone can say that there's a pandemic and control you and make you do things that are completely against science in the name of science and every other damn thing. And so what you see from a psychological perspective is that people that go along with these types of things and do what they think they've got to do because they're being told if they don't do them, this is going to happen or that's going to happen, are really playing out the role of a child in response to mommy, daddy type control drama. And if you study psychology and the structure stages of consciousness, you will find people like Ken Wilber and many others that are experts in that area stating, based on scientific research, that 70% of the world population is still living in the child archetype.
Uh-huh.
If you throw on top of that we've lost our tribal systems of elders, of shaman, of wise men and women and grandmothers and grandfathers and chiefs who carefully orchestrated initiations for young men into adulthood, where they had to differentiate what it means to be a child from what it means to be an adult and what it means to put your life on the line to defend your tribe. The women went through their own initiation with the birthing process, so that was inherent, but some tribes did have specific initiations for women. So you couple everything I've just said together, and you've got a worldwide population that now is subservient to some very, very dangerous people. And if you look at Seamus Bruner's book, Control Oligarchs, it shows you through a very careful analysis that the major players in this game are all psychopathic, that they really have very, very serious issues with control drama and wanting to control and own everything at any expense. And if you study the World Economic Forum's agenda, you see more big daddy controlling you from the sky, and you have no soul, there is no God, you're a hackable animal. And anybody, like, just to show you how crazy this is and exactly what we're talking about, I remember probably 10 years ago watching Bill Gates give a talk on TED. And he stated out loud, we are going to use to reduce the population. Not one single person in the audience of probably 1,000 people even raised their hand and challenged him on that and said, wait a minute, you just said you were going to use to reduce the population. That means to kill people. I've got articles in my library from 2010, right out of newspapers, with Bill Gates saying exactly that. And people just are so unawake that they don't even hear what's being said to them until they're losing their life or losing their job or losing their, can't even go outside their door and get anything to drink. So if you look at how the unconscious works, Jung said, if you don't meet your unconscious on the inside, it will meet you on the outside in the events of your life, and you will call it fate. Well, when we deny what's going on right in front of us, and we keep telling ourselves a story, I don't have time, it's not my problem, and we think politicians are going to rescue us or that Jesus is going to come back and save us, then we're repressing the innate instincts, drives, and intuitions that any adult would have as necessary for its own survival, its family's protection, and the responsibilities any adult would have in any tribal society. And so eventually what happens is the environment keeps creating itself based on what is being allowed. And what is being allowed is that people like Bill Gates, who already gotten sued by the United States government for racketeering, continues to racketeer. Just look at the fact that 3 months before the pandemic happened, Bill Gates got a patent on coronavirus 19. and announced that there would be a pandemic. Well, I mean, if I did that or you did that, we'd have been thrown in jail in 10 minutes and locked up forever. But these guys get on public television and tell everybody how we're going to destroy your life, and you'll own nothing and be happy and eat bugs. So in a nutshell, from a psychological perspective and a spiritual perspective, and also from an earth-centric perspective, I mean, we're so far down the rabbit hole of the destruction of the environments worldwide. I mean, I could sit here for 5 hours straight and tell you about how seriously in trouble we are. And I do it all the time in my podcast and in my books and everything else. But we're just at a point where if we don't get clear on what is important to protect, and I can help make that real clear. I've got several books in my library, probably a dozen of philosophers and scientists and everybody else debating what reality is. Kind of like people were debating what a man or a woman is. I mean, come on, that's a bad sign. But because understanding what reality is so important, I went into meditation and had a conversation with my soul, which is what I do whenever I want to answer big questions. And I said, I need you to help me define reality, because I've read all these books on reality, and all it is a bunch of mental masturbation. Nobody can come to an agreement on what reality is. And if you don't know what reality is, then how do you know what's really happening? So my soul said reality is two things. Reality is what's happening right now, and reality is everything that your life depends upon. So if you look at the digital era that we're in, and I did a podcast called The Danger of Living in Two Realities to point this out, we now have so many people that live in digital realities. They even sell real estate now in digital realities. I actually saw a news report where some guy spent, what was it? It was like $5 million to get a digital condo next to some famous athlete's condo in some virtual reality complex. I'm like, okay, now we're in trouble. So the way I put it to make it really clear is that the tree in the garden on your phone, you don't have to water. You don't have to put a fence around it. You don't have to check the soil and take care of it and have a relationship with it. But it doesn't feed you either. When we get so trapped in a digital reality and playing video games and doing all these things that are out of touch with what our life depends on right now, we get what we got right now. And so I think our initiation is an initiation into the reality of the fact that life is all about relationships, and they're not digital, they're analog, and they're based on reality. So when you have 8 billion people that have lost touch with reality, this is what happens.
So if the outer is a reflection of the inner, are we now potentially experiencing a global movement of ascension? Let's say that the outside, we can talk about, some of the people and institutions that you mentioned, would they not be reflections of the collective consciousness that we're currently healing together? And if that's the case, what would you say, Paul, are some of the steps that we can take moving forward into sovereignty, into freedom, and into love?
Love is inherent, because love by definition is the nature of relationship. You couldn't have atoms without love. So if you're talking about personal, like human love versus real love on a grand scale, love is what holds the entire universe together. When people use the word God, they often really don't know what they're saying. But really, by definition, and I teach this in Spirit Gym because having spent 40 years helping people heal and having a very comprehensive system of analysis of all things physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual in a person's lives, I've seen the number one most common cause of health problems and relationship conflict has something to do with beliefs about what God wants or what God will do to you if you don't follow certain rules.
Good. All right, let's go there.
But by definition, God is that for which there is no other. God is the only being that can create and sustain itself. No other being can do that. God is prime source. God is really a word for a mystery. God's not a person. God's not a place, and God's not a thing. So the problem with God is that until one has real deep mystical experiences or legitimate religious experiences of union with God or the one or all that is, samadhi, for example, they don't really know of God as anything but an idea and what they were taught God was usually as a child. 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation. So most children are raised in a religious framework. And even atheists, in regard to atheism, Jung says, for something to be rejected, it must first be real. So that puts that whole idea. And research on atheists shows that a very high percentage of them had very significant father traumas. So because the Western religions make God a daddy in the sky that controls you, they reject that. But when you follow that system back to its origins, then it all leads to a big bang, but nobody can explain where the bang came from, how it was created, where the matter came from to bang. And it's out of touch with quantum physics at a measure of 1 to the 150th or something crazy like that. In other words, an atheist cannot reconcile reality because matter by definition cannot move itself. So something has to move matter or you cannot have form. So the point that I'm making and what I'm driving at here to connect the dots for everybody is that if God is that for which there is no other, the only way God can experience itself is to create relationships within itself. And this is what the myth of Shakti and Shiva is all about. And it's a very beautiful myth. So in that myth, Shakti, which is intelligent energy, God looks into itself and has the desire to know itself. The desire to know itself manifests the feminine potential, which would be yin in Taoism. But in Tantra, it's Shakti. Shakti dreams up her lover, her consort, her husband, and her friend, Shiva. So what you see is the desire for God to know and experience itself produces desire, which in my model is the L of love, the desire to live. The O of love is potential, pure potential, God. VE is volt electron, the electromotive force, that which moves everything. So if you see Shakti as desire, she dreams Shiva into existence, which is will. So love is actually desire fulfilling itself, which creates will, which creates the movement we call spirit, which matter is spirit moving slowly enough that you can interact with it. So what I'm saying in response to your comment is that love is inherently everything, and it is God experiencing itself. And in order for us to awaken, because whenever you put spirit into matter from an alchemical perspective, it becomes sleepy. Plotinus, who's probably the most quoted metaphysician and philosopher by quantum physicists in the world, because his teachings were so profound that even quantum physicists were absolutely mind-boggled that he was showing them exactly what quantum physics has found 2,500 years ago. Plotinus warns, he said, the soul's greatest addiction is to matter, because the soul is inherently unconditional love, which is God. Only God can give a soul. God is ultimately the source of consciousness itself, and the soul is the sentience, the awareness within the being. And so when the soul has no body, it has no awareness of self. So it's just in the eternal now. But once we have a body, we get so enamored with it. We're like, wow, look at this thing. And we look at all these things to play with and all this stuff I can do. And so we fall very deeply into matter. And so the alchemical approach is through spiritual practice to awaken the spirit, to realize that you are not your body, that you're what's animating the body, using the body so that we can have love and have relationships. Because when you're in this eternal now, you're one with all that is. So you're in a non-dual state, which there you can't have love unless there's a lover and a beloved, just like you cannot have consciousness unless there's a subject or a perceiver and an object or something to perceive. So interestingly, love is the basis of consciousness and is the basis of relationship. And if you look at the relationship between desire and will, they're mirror images of each other. I tell my students, love is like a jet engine. The harder it sucks desire, the harder it blows will. And as an example, I say, look how many people are broke and cannot afford a fancy car, but will put themselves in extreme debt, have to eat rice and beans because their desire is so strong. They will the car into their life at any expense. So to put this into a broader perspective, in order for us to awaken to the spirit within us, we need something to shock us into a state of being awake. If we had nothing but pool parties, cake, and Mai Tais all the time, we would just be in a state of unconscious bliss and nobody would wake up, clean up, grow up, or show up. So what you find is throughout recorded history, there's always been what are called negative polarity holders, souls that come here specifically to stir the pot. So Bill Gates is a great example of a negative polarity holder. So is George Soros, and so is Hitler. And there's, we have a long, long list of them. And so is anybody that challenges us, that puts us in a situation where we really have to get out of our unconscious routine behaviors to think and to act in ways that reflect a more awakened state of being. So what I just said in sort of a long way to build the steps up is that Bill Gates is a potential externally manifest within us, as is all negative polarity holders that are essential to putting us in a relationship that comes with enough challenge that we cannot do what we always have done, or we'll get the results we've always gotten. And that's what it means to be unconscious, right? I describe an addiction as any repeated behavior that does not produce the results you want. So we have an addiction to doing the things that we've been told to do by people that have nefarious intentions. And we have an addiction to taking the path of least resistance and doing as little as possible while hoping to get the most we can get. And we have an addiction to technology, and we have an addiction to machines. But now the technology and the machines are actually so advanced, but we're morally comparatively inept. Some experts say that our technological prowess is about 15 steps of development beyond our moral development, which is a very, very dangerous formula. Steiner warned extensively about what would happen at this time, whether it be or machines, etc. He called that force Ahriman, which comes from Zoroastrianism, which is really, it's similar to what the Christians would call the devil or evil, but it's different because it's really the urge to, Ahriman's the urge to automate, the urge to control, and the urge to mechanize, and the urge to basically stay unconscious and be machine-like. And it's also shown by research and by experts that the more you interact with machines, the more machine-like you become in your thinking and your behavior and in your way of relating. And machines are unconscious. They're not conscious. So what I've just shared is that Bill Gates, because the truth of everything is unity, but without the illusion of separation, you cannot experience love. Therefore, God creates the illusion of separation or individuality in order for love to exist. And as we wake up, we become more conscious. And when we realize that we are all expressions of the one or the divine, and we wake up, then we want to co-create together in ways that bring us a greater sense of meaningful fulfillment and bring us back towards a state of unity. But the difference is, when we arrive there through conscious awareness, then we are aware of who and what we really are and what the word God really means. And then we celebrate the beauty of being able to look at God and to act in relationship to God, because now we've become co-creators instead of just sleepwalkers. And I think we're at a time in the world where if we didn't have events like COVID and everything that's going on to make us say, wait a minute, we can't keep doing this, we would just keep smoking pot and legalizing mushrooms until everybody completely forgot to take care of everything that really matters with regard to reality, which is nature, the planet, each other, and being conscious of the future that we want our children to have. So from a spiritual perspective, I think, thank God for the strife in the world, because otherwise people would just eat themselves and the world into non-existence. And funny enough, that's exactly what the globalists say. That's why they want to get rid of people. They think the world can't support all these people, and they call us useless eaters and hackable animals and, vermin. So they're doing their job very beautifully. And from a spiritual perspective, the function of evil is to uphold the good. If you didn't have evil, you would not know what the good was. And paradoxically, when good becomes righteous and you start forcing people, like Christian ministers trying to proselytize people into accepting Jesus and doing nasty things to people, like killing them if they don't convert, then now what you see is the good switches polarity. So what the word good's only good when it's good for everybody, not good for just for a few. So when good becomes good with negative intention or nefarious intention, now it becomes evil. So without evil to uphold the good, we would still be completely unconscious of what is good or what is beautiful or what is true. And then we would not evolve. And we would see from my perspective of a lifetime of investigating this stuff, the greatest experience God can have is when any sentient being consciously realizes that they are one with the divine, and they always have been. Because at that moment, God is consciously realized. You see, I every morning when I do my prayers, I say, thank you, God, because you are, I am. And because I am, you are. So what am I saying? If it wasn't for God, there would be nothing here. Thank you, God, because you are, I am. God, because I am, and I know you're there, you are. Mm-hmm. In other words, if there was nobody to worship God, then what would the point be? God would be really alone. So, my conception of God is not, religious in the classical sense. It's religious in this fact that religion means the same thing yoga does. It means link back or to unite to. So religion's really the process of linking back to that which is the deeper truth of you, which is unity.
Paul Chek, mate, drop in the mic. That was brilliant. Thank you for sharing. And I'm glad you talk about God, creator, the unified field, consciousness, all that is and has ever been, because for many, many years I was disconnected. No, let me rephrase. I felt disconnected. I had not remembered that I was a unique expression, a fractal of the one. And through pain and through challenge and heartache and grief and, loss and pain, I've come to see and understand that these are necessary parts of me peeling back the layers of coming home and remembering. And similarly to COVID, when COVID hit, I was judgmental. I was pointing fingers, just like, many people did and some do. Like these people and these institutions are doing this to us, not recognizing that, hey, if we didn't, we would still be asleep. If we don't have these challenges, we might still have been, forgetting. So I love how you say these things are things to be aware of, and at the same time, they were necessary to shake us up. I think this is brilliant. And on that note, I want to segment over to the next question. You talk about the pain teacher. Okay, no one. Let me rephrase. I shouldn't say no one. I would say most people don't want to experience pain. I've had 4 months of the most amount of grief that I've ever experienced in my life. However, it's brought me into my heart and grace and love and joy at a whole new level, like whole new level. Can you tell us what is the pain teacher and how can we use it for our awakening and our healing and so on?
Well, I just described the pain teacher in many ways, but basically, the pain teacher is a metaphor that I created to help my patients over the last 40 years realize why pain is in their life. And let me give you an example of why we need the pain teacher. I have been lecturing professionally since 1988. I've traveled the world. My wife Penny and I used to make it around the world twice a year, every year. We did that for like 25 years. I've lectured in massage therapy circles, chiropractic, osteopathic. I've lectured in medical schools. I've lectured in high-level sports conditioning. I've lectured in the Australian Institute of Sport, Olympic committees, large corporations, and I'm one of the few guys that was in like 5 different fields at the same time. So around 2005, when I created my 4-doctor model, because I needed to synthesize for my students and my instructors, because by the time you graduate from the CHEK Academy, you can do assessments on people all day long. And so they end up with such a massive amount of data, they would be confused as to where to begin. What do you do when someone has 40 major things going on at the same time? Like, how do you prioritize that? So what I did is I said, well, geez, I don't know how you guys, it's kind of like when you're naturally good at something, you might make the dangerous assumption that everybody also is. Yeah. Like, to me, I thought that was obvious, and so I synthesized a system of a living philosophy with 4 doctors: Dr. Happiness, Dr. Movement, Dr. Diet, and Dr. Quiet. And so I said, now look at each patient's life and ask, are they happy? And what is their dream? If you have a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis. You get up and you are in a co-creative act with spirit, with self, with friends, with coworkers. Oh. You're alive, right? You're actually alive. So,
did you hear that? Can you say that again, Paul? If you have
a big enough dream, you don't need a crisis.
Ooh.
Okay, that actually comes from a psychologist named Jerry Wesh. So my first priority when I'm analyzing a patient is what turns you on every day, what gets your juices flowing. And paradoxically, large research studies from around the world, in Europe, 75% of people surveyed said they hated their job. In the United States, 70% of people said they hated their job. So we have 70 to 75% of almost the world population that hates doing what they do every day. There again is the archetype of the child doing what mommy and daddy tell them to do, not what they love to do. So the first thing I've got to do is say, what is it that is driving this person to do what they do? And when you find that a person does not have a dream, goal, or objective that their heart buys into, then ultimately all you've got left is they simply work for money, which is like working just to exist. And I tell my patients that labor of love is sustainable, but any other labor is not sustainable. And so I'll complete this by saying I have to look at how they're moving their body, because the body has very specific needs. It's a product of nature. We have an animal body that has to have its movement, nutrition. And then we have to look at a person's diet because of the obvious factors there. And we got to look at Dr. Quiet, which represents rest and introspection, time to be in and with yourself, to have a relationship with yourself. So simply put, when a person's not doing what they love to do, then they're just dealing with constant labor. And they can begin to resent themselves, and they can begin to resent the people they love, because those are the people that they often have to work to feed. And this is often repressed into the unconscious, but really it goes into the shadow, because it's actually our responsibility to choose what it is that we love to do and do it. And so when I'm analyzing people, I have to look at what is their living inspiration and motivation, or lack thereof? What is their level of movement, engagement, and is it the right type for their body's needs? What is their diet like, and what kind of deficits are coming from the diet, and what is their level of rest, regeneration, or in other words, their anabolic yin capacity relative to catabolic yang capacity? Most people are just way catabolic. Yeah. And then I have to look at their capacity for resting, and do they have a relationship with themselves, so that they actually spend time in and with themselves, without which you can never know what's brewing in your unconscious. So you just become the slave to the puppet master of your own unconscious programming. And so essentially the pain teacher is a signifier for the fact that what we are creating unconsciously manifests in our lives and can only produce the outcome of what we're choosing unconsciously. So the pain teacher shows up to say, hey, you know what? Haven't you noticed you're getting a little fatter every day? And if you don't stop, you're going to have diabetes. But what do people do? They just keep looking in the mirror as they get, it takes 10 years to be obese. You have to work at it. It takes 10 years to get cancer on average. You got to work at it. So the pain teacher is ultimately a symbol of the awakening that comes when we have to accept responsibility for the creative powers of God within us being used in ways that are not life affirmative. So if you're not acting in ways that reflect love to your spouse, the pain teacher is going to show up. For sure. If you're not loving your body, the pain teacher shows up. If you're not loving yourself enough to take responsibility for the life you're living and what you're doing to make a living, the pain teacher shows up. So really the pain teacher is a signifier for the inevitable responsibilities of our own creations. And when the pain teacher shows up, it's an opportunity to say, this is what I've created. Is this what I want? And if it's not, how did I keep creating what I didn't want? And what do I do to create what I do want? And that's Dr. Happiness. Dr. Happiness says it's your job to choose what's happy making for you and do it. Nobody's going to force you to do it. And there's trillions of dollars being made off the pain teacher. So, that's why media is keeping you unconscious, and movies. And, it's a perpetual game of making money off of unconscious people. And the pain teacher shows up no matter what the game is, because the bigger game is you're here to realize who and what you really are. And the pain teacher will show up when you're not doing that.
Whew. You know what? I love the reframe here that the mammalian brain, reptilian brain, it's just like, no, no, no. I don't want to have pain. I don't want to have suffering. I don't want to go on a fast because then I'll get hungry and then I'll get hangry and then I'll get da 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 da. And so it's like, wow, it's not something that I need to avoid. It's something that I need to observe and ask the question, what is this pain teacher teaching me?
Yeah, and a huge amount of our pain is projected, just like fear. I say to my students and patients all the time, how many times in your life were you really afraid because you thought you were going to have no money, or your husband or your wife was going to leave you, or that so-and-so didn't like you, or that the bottom was going to fall out, or you weren't beautiful enough or smart enough, and on it goes. And then I ask, of all the times, if you could put your head into a quantum supercomputer and count all the times that you were scared to death or were creating pain for yourself out of the fear of what you were sure was going to happen, but it never did, what percentage of the time did you scare the shit out of yourself, stress the hell out of yourself, give yourself adrenal fatigue, give yourself an ulcer, and it never happened? Well, that's most of the time. Right? So there's the pain teacher manifesting to show us how crazy powerful our mind is. And the problem is that to the cells of our body, our mind is literally God. If you think you're sad, your whole body will manifest sadness for you. Your hormones will change, your facial expression will change, your posture, your gesture, your bowel movements, your sex drive. If you tell your body every day, I love you, I'm happy, and I'm, really excited to take the challenges of life on because that's how I learn and grow, your whole body will manifest that. I mean, look, you're a living example, aren't you? My wife looked at your website and gave me an overview. You had a bad motorcycle crash. You really went through hell and decided that you were going to make something beautiful out of it. Well, that's the pain teacher.
Yeah.
Coming to turn you into the person you came to the world to be.
Amen.
Without the pain teacher, we would be sound asleep and stoned out of our fucking minds.
Paul, this is so good. Also, what we love to do on this show is to reflect this back to the listeners and viewers, because you recognize right now that maybe Paul and I and our conversation is a reflection of what you could, evolve within yourself, a mirror perhaps. If that's the case, what is the pain currently teaching you? Is it your body? Is it your mind? Is it your business? Is it your relationship? And, what is this next step that you could take instead of judging that or pushing it away? What is the lesson in it, and what could be the next step for you in terms of how you could make this pain teacher not go away but be transmuted into the lesson that it might be divinely guiding you into? So yeah, take that into consideration. And this is amazing. Paul, I want to ask you, you created Spirit Gym.
Yeah.
And I have looked at Spirit Gym. I've gone through some of the modules. I think there's some absolutely life-changing stuff in there. Can you tell our listeners and viewers, I'm confident some people want to learn more, all right? Because I'm, for one, is resonating a lot with the things that you're sharing here. Can you tell us about Spirit Gym?
Yeah, what I did is I've been working on Spirit Gym for 10 years. In fact, right here is 13 notebooks. There's 3 of the 13 sitting over there that are full of notes over 10 years of planning and researching in key areas that I knew I have to put lessons together to get some really solid education developed. And, Spirit Gym's my magnum opus. It's kind of like the synthesis of my 40-year plus career now. I started when I was 21 or 2, I think 22, and I'm 63 now. Yeah, so 41 years. And when the pandemic hit and I saw how people were just rolling over and playing dead and running off to get I'm like, okay, you ask the doctor to show you the insert on the to see what the side effects are. It's blank. People do more research on what toaster oven they're going to buy than what they're letting so-called doctors put in their body. So when I saw, not only that, I used to be a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is an elite level soldier. And I went to battlefield strategy training. And I want you to know, as a soldier, you were raised in Norway. You must have been a soldier too. Don't you guys have mandatory military service?
That's correct. Very cold and very hard, but it was it was a great process.
Okay, good. So you will recognize the signs that I'm about to point out. When you're in military battlefield training, strategy training, they tell you the first two things you've got to do to win a war is knock out their enemy's communications and knock out their food supply. Censorship is knocking out your communications and controlling the food supply. Isn't it interesting that 120 plus food factories mysteriously caught on fire or exploded during COVID?
I saw that.
And isn't it amazing that farmers all over the world are being shut down, and Bill Gates is trying to get rid of and even actually started suing in Oregon to make it illegal to farm animals. Okay, so I'm watching this and I'm going like, this is fifth generation warfare. People don't realize we're actually in a world war right now, but it's not a country against country. It's a few crazy people that have enough money, that own the media, that can control everybody doing this. So the point I'm making is I went, okay, that's it. I have got to do everything I can do to wake people up and give them the tools to become conscious and understand what's really going on in life from a spiritual perspective, so they can actually engage in using the very powers that got us all into a situation like we're in. Because I tell my patients all the time, look, they come into me all broken and messed up and sad and depressed. And I say, congratulations. They look at me and go, what do you mean?
I do that too, yeah. That's very triggering, but true.
Well, and then I continue. They say, well, what do you mean, congratulations? I've got this, I've got that, I'm broken. I'm like, yes, isn't it amazing how powerful your ability to create is? I see now all we've got to do is teach you how to use the same power that got you all messed up to set you free. But this time you'll stay free because you'll know who's doing it. And so you're not injured. You're in your internship into your spiritual adulthood. And that's the beauty of having a skilled therapist that doesn't just see you as a machine, that knows exactly what they're working on. So what I'm saying is I realized I had to create a system to help people understand what life's all about, what God really means, what spirit is, what soul is, what a myth is, and why myth is so primary. And most people are completely clueless to their own myth. They're just living out like robots until the pain teacher comes to wake them up, and then unfortunately just get drugged out. And so I took my heart and soul and poured everything into 5 years of work. It's a 15-volume book set. We're getting ready to publish the first volume. I've written over 3,000 pages. It's loaded with original art and diagrams to explain very complex topics. And Spirit Gym is a membership program where I have produced 75 pre-recorded lessons with beautiful graphics and diagrams, all with self-help, practical exercises, meditations, inner exploration, shadow healing, understanding what consciousness is, the structure stages of how consciousness evolves, and how to recognize what you can do to awaken to the possibility to grow to the next stage of your own psychological and spiritual development, how to think holistically, what you need to know about nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement, what the 4 doctors are, what the 4 life process archetypes are, what the 3 psychological prerequisites are. I mean, all the fundamental things that we should all have been taught from children through university, so we could go out and really have the skills and the tools to make the world a beautiful place for all living beings and for each other. That's what Spirit Gym's all about. It's for people that really want an honest, deep, comprehensive approach that is self-paced with me mentoring everybody. We have a weekly Sangha meeting, and I give a lesson on something specific to Spirit Gym. And then every other week, I just do Q&A on the lessons and say, what's your questions? And I open it up and I coach everyone just like my private clients. So if you were going through a relationship crisis, you can get on there and ask me for help, and I will take you through the steps of how to resolve a relationship crisis. If you're having a health problem, whatever it is, we deal with it in real time. And I use the skills that I've developed in my career to help people with all the issues, because I'm a holistic health practitioner. So people don't just come to me with one kind of injury. I see addicted people, depressed people, structurally damaged people, health problems, cancer, you name it. I've seen it all. I've worked with it. And, I've helped a lot of people heal with holistic approaches, because we are a holistic integrated system of systems. And if you don't understand the control system of the hierarchy of control in the human body, then, what happens is you keep treating symptoms. You never actually get to what's going on. So Spirit Gym's really a group of committed people that are here to really be the grassroots movement, to take responsibility for our creative agency, our capacity to live and love fully, and to be the change the world needs now instead of waiting for somebody else to do it. Because the danger is if someone else does come back and fix the world, we will be their children for another 2,000 years.
Oh, yes. Hey, Paul, we're about to wrap up, but I want to ask, because we didn't even get to the kinesiology conversation. I think our listeners and viewers would love to have you back. Are you willing to reschedule for a sequel?
Yeah, whenever you want. Penny can work you into my schedule. I mean, I try to help as many people as I can, and I think podcasts are such an amazing medium. That's why I started my podcast a long time ago now. But,
so let's talk about that. I want to give people some authentic, real resources here. You've just heard about Spirit Gym. The website is myspiritgym in one word.com, myspiritgym.com.
Yeah.
If you want to check out the website, it's CHEK Institute, which is CHEK Institute.com, or paulchek.com.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more, just to tune in to this kind of, intelligence and information that's coming through, Spirit Gym with Paul Chek is the name of the podcast. Spirit Gym with Paul Chek. Cool. Bro, I got one last question for you before we get you back for a sequel. Are you ready for the last question?
I'm always ready, man.
Man, I can tell. Here we go. I want you to imagine that you are on the world stage. Every sentient... Yes, you are. Now this one's going to go viral, I can tell. You're on the world stage. Every sentient being alive has gathered. They're watching. They're tuning into your message to the world. Take a breath. Whenever you're ready, sir, do tell us, what is your message to the world right now?
Use your heart to feel what you know.
The shortest ones are normally the best. Use your heart to feel what you know. Thank you, Paul, for being on this show today. We are so excited. We'll get this far and wide, and we can't wait to have you back for the sequel.
Yeah, no problem. Whenever you want to wrap, I'm ready.
You're on. Thank you so much. This is Mr. Paul Chek, everybody.
Thank you, guys.